Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowering Leaders podcast. At Aleda, we are passionate about inspiring connections and creating a world of collaboration. Our signature program, Aleda Connect, curates groups of 5 to 6 leaders from diverse backgrounds in sport, industry, social venture and the arts who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
I've probably had some of the most radical changes out of that leadership group. The significance of their work and how much it's really about helping others. It made me think, what else could I be doing? And I approached our owner, and within a few weeks we'd raised $5 million to try and solve obesity in the underprivileged community in Milwaukee. So that's one spark that leadership course has caused to contribute and leave the world as a better place.
It defines the word creativity for me. The ability to see connections where none seem to exist. And I think that's the magic of Aleda. Definitely not my usual, workshop panels like humanitarian spaces, but more of an intentional dissection of leadership.
The Empowering Leaders podcast is proudly brought to you by Victoria University, where cutting-edge sports and exercise science facilities like heat chambers, performance labs, and altitude environments mean VU is ranked 7th in the world for sports science. VU, uniquely you. As always, a big thank you to Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper Bedding, a mattress like no other. If you enjoy listening to the Empowering Leaders podcast, be sure to subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, we would love you to leave a review so we can reach more listeners and empower more leaders. Peter Dutton is hoping to be the next Prime Minister of Australia, and on the Empowering Leaders podcast, we aim to tell great leadership stories. We have invited the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and hope to have him on the podcast as well soon. Peter, I first met you around 12 years ago, and we share a great mutual friend, Jeffrey Thomas, we were just talking about before we hit record. And over the last 10 years, I've had the great pleasure of meeting Kirralie and your family, and declare in this interview, I consider you a friend. And I think when people ask me about Peter Dutton, the words I use is the most misrepresented person in public life that I've ever met. In a short space of time, you're a great chance to be the next Prime Minister of Australia. I thought I'd start with, what, in your own words, what's Peter Dutton really like?
Well, Darcy, great to be with you. Thank you, mate, and thanks for your leadership. But look, I think people can get to know you through longer form interviews, and instead of just the sound bites on a package, TV of a night time in the news. And as the campaign goes on, I hope people can see more of my story and who I am and my background, and people can make their own judgments instead of being defined by your opponents or those who have an axe to grind. So I'm a pretty open book. I'm not too complicated in that sense. I'm just happy to be open and honest about my values, what I stand for, and that's the basis on which I make decisions. And people, as I say, can draw a positive or negative conclusion out of that. I don't I've never gone into politics to crave that popularity or that recognition. It's just that's not been part of my my sort of being, and I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin.
Your wife Kirralie described you as this: relaxed, very gentle, empathetic. He's a great mate. He's a good son. He's an excellent dad, and that's the person that I've met. As you said just then, the opposition do this maybe too good a job of painting you as some sort of Batman villain at times. And do you think that now in these sort of formats people are starting to see the real version of you?
Yeah, I think so. I think people stop you and say, I heard that interview the other day and I didn't know this about you. I hadn't heard that before. And it's funny because I've been in public life for over 23 years or so, and people have seen me through the lens of being the sports minister or immigration minister or health minister or Home Affairs Minister, Defence Minister, whatever it might be, that sort of snapshot and that point in time. And Leader of the House, I mean, it's some of these roles you sort of take on the attack dog role, which is a necessary one in the Parliament. It's an adversarial environment, and I've always said that I went into politics not wanting to sit on the fence, but stand up for what I believe in, and that it's a game of tackle, not touch. And if you walk away with your head held high, did make every call as you would want in hindsight, but not to live with those regrets. And yeah, I think that's people can appreciate that.
First thing, whenever I see you, always ask about family, as you did first thing this morning. And I just thought you could go back and tell us about your extended family, mum and dad, and your siblings growing up, and your current family.
Yeah, so pretty humble, sort of outer suburbs upbringing, and Dad worked hard, Mum worked hard, raised 5 kids, and really, they sacrificed and went without to give us a good education. Sort of, I guess, second tier school, not sort of first tier private schools that they couldn't afford back in the day. But Mum took in kids as a family daycare mum to pull some extra dollars together to save to send us to school. Dad started out as a bricklayer and a builder, and ultimately was successful through hard work and his endeavours, and with Mum's support. So that was the grounding. It was a carefree life, and jumping on the bike and playing backyard cricket until dark. Jumping around in the pool, the above ground pool in those days in the backyard, and I think it gives you an appreciation of what you've got now, but also that there are a lot of people in humble households right now who are really doing it tough.
Oldest of 5.
Yes.
So are you close to the siblings?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. And there's 10 years between myself and my youngest sister, and they're all different jobs, and but we've always remained close. And my mum and dad separated when I finished year 12 in 1987. Sort of, I guess one of those family dynamics where you wait until you finished year 12 before they separated, and that was a messy situation, and for us as siblings, it probably drew us closer together. But we grew up as kids with a really close relationship with our cousins, and that was a real highlight for me as a child growing up. And I've wanted that for our kids as well, to be close to my brother and sisters, their kids, and they are, and it's nice to see them together and seeing them playing together. And it's also the highlight for we sort of congregate largely at Dad's place, and it's the joy of his life as well, and it's good to see him enjoying the grandkids and the joy that comes with seeing all of them together.
I think, Peter, that immediately it humanises people when you know their backstory, and even your own. You were married at 23 for a short time, and I think Rebecca, your beautiful daughter, was with a partner you're engaged with, and you meet Kirralie pretty soon after, who's been your lifelong partner. You had the 2 boys with. That's a bit of complexity for a young man at that stage, mate. How did you work your way through all that?
I didn't do too well to start with. So I was married at 23, and we'd sort of lived together for 12, 18 months or something before that. And I picked my then wife up she was a nurse, and picked her up from work one day, and after a night shift, and she just said, "Look, I don't love you anymore," and tried to work on that, but it just didn't work. And I was working 2 jobs. I was, keen to make money and try and set ourselves up. She wanted to travel, and it was just, we were too young for that relationship, and it was confronting, because I'd always, particularly with my parents having separated, which really, upset and I didn't cope with that well at the time as a 17-year-old. And I always thought, I wanted to get married, and I wanted to be for life, and I wanted to raise a big family, and that wasn't the case. And so that was.
Did it knock you around?
It did. And it takes a while to recover from that. But I guess you deal with all of those knockbacks and setbacks, and when you look at it with the benefit of hindsight, there was just a level of immaturity, and there was no third parties or anything like that. It was just the reality of, for me, working 2 jobs and working hard, and we were together at the wrong time.
One of those 2 jobs was as a police officer. Yeah. You started out, I know you spent some time as a kid working in a butcher shop as well. What drew you to want to be in uniform, and tell us about that time?
But I'd wanted to be a policeman from a young age. I don't know why. I listened to my mother's advice, which you should always do, I suppose. But, no one in our family had been to university before, and she was keen for me to go, and I was keen to go too. But I started out doing a Bachelor of Business. I really wanted to go to the police academy, but she wanted me to do that, and it was good advice. I did it for 2 years, and I was majoring in accountancy, which I didn't enjoy. So I decided to defer, and I finished my degree later on. But I went into policing because I couldn't see myself, sitting in a bank 9 to 5 behind a desk or an accountancy firm or something like that. And I liked the, sort of the pace or the excitement or the unknown factor within a policing career, and that's, I guess, what I enjoyed. And it's a little bit like this job. You don't know what the news cycle holds today. You don't know the next question in an interview, which is not encouragement to ask a horrible question. But as a policeman, you just don't know what that next radio call is going to be or what's behind that door that you're about to enter. And there is, for me, I've always sort of been attracted to that dynamic.
The theme that I understand runs through your life as a policeman, you were zero tolerance on violence against women and children, and you fast track to your political life. I want to ask you about what I think might be one of your proudest achievements, the formation of ACE, the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. It's a $100 million investment. It's regarded as a global leader in that space. Is that the reason why you're drawn to politics, the chance to do things like that?
Yeah, short answer is yes, and I'm incredibly proud of what the work that the police and the analysts and all of the tech people do. And for those who aren't aware of the work, it's really interesting to have a look at them online actually, because it's a function of the Australian Federal Police, and they counter child exploitation here, but in the region as well. So I think they've saved now over 1,500 lives of young kids that were in the hands of pedophiles or subject to those networks. And the technical aspect of it, where they can look at a photo, an image of a child sitting at the end of a bed or in a car, and they can analyse that to try and identify where, and the circumstances of that child being at risk and how they can recover that child. It's the talent and the expertise is amazing, but it was underfunded and it wasn't a priority. And when I came into that portfolio and had responsibility for the Federal Police, I gave a direction to the Commissioner to prioritise that, because in my household, we were just very fortunate that, there was no sexual abuse that I was aware of in my world. I'd never seen, or I probably had a pretty naive upbringing. But as a police officer, a 19-year-old, walking into domestic violence situations and seeing blood splattered across the walls, or kids screaming and grabbing onto mum or dad's leg as people are fighting, all of that is just horrible and scars you. And I'd worked then in the sex offenders squad, where you're taking statements from rape victims or visiting crime scenes and interviewing offenders and taking people through the courts, and the frustration of all of that process when there's not an adequate sentence given at the end of it. And so, yes, I mean, that's been a driver for me, and the protection of women and children, I think, is paramount, because I think the protection of that innocence of their upbringing and allowing them to be children and allowing women to live their lives freely as most men would expect. I just think it's a human right, and it's not a given, unfortunately.
Bizarrely, I used to sit in a breakfast radio studio, Peter, for 11 years, and you read the paper front to back every day because you're looking at the news. Hidden on page 18 would be some horrific, child sex offence that had two paragraphs. On the front page would be some footballer, with a new girlfriend, and you think, have we got our priorities so wrong? It doesn't seem as though the thing that I know drives you gets the attention from mainstream. Have you got a theory on that?
Yeah, look, I do, and I think it's a real societal issue, because at one level it's understandable. At dinner parties, people will be talking about houses being broken into, or cars being stolen, or the the gangland wars or the tobacco shop, arsons, whatever it might be, because it's in the news. People can see the footage and it affects them. But the next conversation about the pedophile ring that's just been discovered and the child that's been sexually abused, understandably, people don't want to talk about that either in front of their children or at a dinner party where people are trying to enjoy each other, at a barbecue, whatever it might be. And it's wrong because we have to lift the veil. The images of these offenders are blurred out because the law requires that to be the case. The names are normally protected, and so the footage is, there's no CCTV from the robbery at the service station that people can see and conceptualise and see the violence that that was the subject of that crime. And so I just think as a society we have to accept that this is a very significant crime type, and it really it upsets me that we don't talk more about it, because I think the awareness, encouraging children to speak up, encouraging adults to look for signs, all of that hopefully would lead to a reduction in the incidents, but sadly it doesn't.
I want to chat to you about a few of the issues that you seem to find clarity on, whether people agree with you or not. We caught up, I don't know if you remember, had a beer in the city in Melbourne, and the Voice to Parliament had just been mooted, and you asked me about it, and I really hadn't understood it at all, and the idea that our Indigenous brothers and sisters would have a voice in the government of Australia. And on the surface, everyone who cares about Indigenous Australians, immediately you think about what you can do and what that means. You just come back from visiting a number of the remote Indigenous communities, and mid-sentence you stopped and you actually had a tear, and you were talking about just how horrific some of the circumstances that you'd seen were and how much it affected you. And yet in public life, you were opposed to the Voice, and I think someone in Parliament might have even called you a racist at the time. And I'm just, this theme of this person I know that cares deeply versus this image is polar opposites. Can you tell us about how you arrived to that decision?
So just go back a second though. We caught up for a beer, and I think you introduced me to some low carb, trendy beer that I hadn't had before. But
which you graciously said was okay. I gave you a gluten-free beer, mate, and you went, mate.
I sucked it down. It was okay. So look, mate, every Australian wants a better outcome for Indigenous Australians, and it's not a lack of money. The money is there, and it's this huge funnel that just becomes a drip at the end when you get to these communities. And you go up to a place like Gove, to Yunupingu land, and you look at the great work that he did during his lifetime, and what his brothers and others are doing there now. But there's a 90% attendance rate at school. I walked into a classroom where these young kids were preparing for a robotics competition in the United States. They were travelling, from this little Indigenous community to the US, and they were just beaming with excitement. And they were in uniform, and Barker College had a relationship with this local school, and it was just an amazing demonstration of leadership within a community where they had a sustainable logging business, a building business, the streets were clean, health services were provided, and it was a functioning society. And, I was in that classroom with those kids, and I don't mind saying, like, I went to the side and, I can be a bit emotional sometimes, but I had to compose myself, because what I'd seen there compared to what I'd seen only a couple of hours by plane away in other communities was just chalk and cheese. And in some communities where you've got kids who are living in complete squalor, kids who are out breaking into homes or businesses and stealing cars of a night time because they're afraid to go home to an unsafe environment, and they sleep during the day, therefore they miss school. And the contrast, like it just really hit me that why can these kids live a life that we would expect for all of our kids, but exactly the same kids, Australians, each one of them, in another community like Alice Springs can't enjoy that normality. And so I just thought the voice was ultimately more about the elites than it was about those kids and about their parents. And you speak to the elderly women and the elders otherwise in the communities and the town camps, they want what every parent does across the country. They want a stable home environment. They want an education for their kids. They want health. They want running water, and they want to have jobs there for their kids as they graduate from school. And the whole conversation is diverted by a group of people that care more about themselves than the people they're supposed to represent. And I want to see those kids going into a trade. I want to see them going to university. I want to see them enjoying the normality of life. And I don't think that's too much to ask for. And I just thought the voice was going to be an entrenchment or an enshrinement in the Constitution of something that was going to set back the prospects of Indigenous people for a long time.
But you've been handed the tough portfolios traditionally of defence and immigration and these complex issues, just like the one you described then, and you have a way of seeing through difficult issues, even when they're really emotional. When we've got people detained on places like Manus Island and immigration detention centres, anyone understands how horrific that is. How do you, when you sit in those leadership roles, how do you come to a clear decision? Do you wrestle with that, or how would you explain something like that?
Well, look, they're tough decisions, but in the end, if you're the Home Affairs Minister, when the file lands on your desk, it's gone through 10 other hands, and the decision ultimately hasn't been made by those people, and so it's the toughest of decisions you're presiding over. And normally, you look at the facts before you, and there's a terrible decision, and just 2 degrees less than that, it's the devil's curse in terms of the decision you've got before you. But ultimately, your job is to take a decision that's in our country's best interest, that's going to provide a safe outcome for Australians. It's going to preserve our sovereignty or our rule of law, and that's the lens that you have to look at it through, and you have to look obviously at the human side. And there are countless visas that I issued for kids and for their parents, and parents whose mother or father had come here from a part of the world and had a stroke or been diagnosed with dementia and couldn't return home, and you do all of that without the public seeing any of it. And when I went into the portfolio, there were kids in detention, and boats obviously had arrived, and our desire was to stop the boats and then to get the kids out of detention. And I was proud that on my watch we got everyone out. And if you don't have border security and you don't have integrity, then people take advantage of that, and the people smugglers will take the money off innocent men, women and children because they're just another commodity. And when the people aren't there paying the money, they're running prostitutes, they're running the human trafficking, they're running drugs, they're running tobacco. These people just don't have the same set of standards that we do, and you have to deal with that, and you have to try and take that business model away from them, because ultimately people drown at sea and kids end up in detention. The much better way to run the migration program is to bring people in a regularised way, give them an opportunity. We brought in, I brought in thousands of women who are Yazidis, and the Yazidis had been subject to sexual servitude and had been raped and brutalised by ISIS and ISIL. And, those women came in, have made amazing Australians, have started a life that their parents, that they could never have imagined themselves as children. And they'll 2, 3, 4, 10 generations' time, those kids and those generations will be talking about how brave, their great-great-great-grandmother was, who came to Australia. And so you've got to get that balance right. I guess that's the point.
We all are born different. As we grow, the experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts, who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The Aleda Connect experience for me has been transformational. I met people that I would never have met from totally different spheres. It's very basic. It's all about relationships. It's all about how we communicate. And what the Aleda Connect group does that is so powerful is when you bring 2 people from 2 totally different worlds together, there's no ego. It just leaves room for the real you. And I think that's what Aleda gave me, was bringing back the real me and really connecting to my own leadership style.
We're doing this interview this morning in Melbourne, Australia, and commonplace to have had a home invasion or have had a neighbours have one. We have had a couple in recent times at our own home, and you speak to the neighbours and almost everyone in the street. In your role at Home Affairs, you deported and cancelled the visas of more thousands and thousands and thousands of people, pedophiles and bikies and violent criminals. Their connections then went after your family in the most horrific way, which is an untold story. And your kids were subjected to having federal police out the front of their classrooms and some horrific things to Kirli, your wife. Was there a moment where you thought, is this all worth it? Did that get to you?
It's a tough question because I've always said that I would leave this job overnight if one of my kids went off the rails or, they needed me more than the job did. The most remarkable thing about, my wife Kirli and my kids is that they've never complained about it, and it's intrusive because you have 24/7 security. It means you don't lead a normal life but that's the price you pay. I mean, I think we're a safer community, safer society because of those people that we deported. These were serious criminals, and no, I don't think that I thought about leaving the job, and that was never something that a conversation that Caroline and I had where she said, this is too much. You need to get out. She's been stoic and supportive every day, and I've been incredibly grateful for that because you couldn't do this job without that support and without a strong relationship. And it gives you the ballast, and it also allows you when you get back home to be able to reset. And I think mentally that's important as well, that you don't just carry the burden of this job, which is a vocation. It's not a normal job where you go home and 5:10 you're off the train and you're back home and you can switch off. It goes constantly. So to be able to have that support network with your wife and kids and your close friends as well, that for me has been really important. And it hurts me that I put them at risk because of my job. But I'm incredibly grateful that they take it in their stride. And I probably told this story before, but I think the only complaint been maybe 2 complaints. I mean, one is that the kids have done their 100 hours of driving with the AFP and the rear vision mirror. Which comes with a layer. Well, it becomes a bit hard because, they're on their L's and you're trying to, you're sitting in the passenger seat trying to give them guidance. But when you take off from the stop sign, you've got to allow room for 2 cars, so your car and the car behind you to make the turn. And so it all becomes a bit stressful for them. And so there's a bit of a gripe about that. And then, the bum bags at school that the AFP carry and trying to convince your kids that nobody knows who they are, but kids are much smarter than what you realise. So, but no, they've been great, and they've grown up to be, now young adults, and I'm incredibly proud of them.
I've heard you talk in recent times a lot about the Australian dream of owning your own house and how that's become harder for the current generation than perhaps ever before in Australian history. In a few months' time, you could be the next Prime Minister of Australia. What are some of the things that people should know that you want to achieve?
Well, I will break my back to make sure that people can achieve the dream of home ownership, because I think it's such an important part of our culture. For me personally, it's been a way to, I've renovated homes over the years bought and sold, and it's been a way to create wealth. And I think it is the foundation of being able to form a stable relationship and raise kids. I think the value increase in an asset, as we've seen in housing over recent years, means that you can live a comfortable life in retirement, and it's an asset that grows in value such that you can bequeath it to your children and help set them up. And renting for life is not part of our culture, and ultimately it's not a way to generate wealth. The other aspect to it, which is important to us as a Liberal Party, is that generally it's the asset that is the security to start a small business. And small business is very important to our party, and just giving people that choice. If that's what they want to do, that's great. If they don't want to do it, well, that's fine. So we've got a huge problem though, because the migration program has brought in about 1 million people over the last 2 years, and we're a great country because of migration, but it needs to be in a managed way, because at the same time we've had a record low of building approvals. Construction costs have gone through the roof. Land supply has been limited, and we've had this perfect storm where you've seen rents go up by about 20%. You've seen people lose the hope of and the aspiration of home ownership, and I want to restore that hope and that dream again. And we've announced a $5 billion package to provide support to councils to help them with sewerage and water infrastructure and road infrastructure, so that they can develop the land more quickly and bring that on. And we'll have more to say in relation to housing, because I think it's a really significant problem in the community. And I want those young people who are working hard to have an expectation that they can own a home, and I don't think that's unreasonable.
Peter, I had the great privilege of sitting across from a range of different people, and what I would say great leadership stories as yours is absolutely, and these sort of patterns around what great leaders do. And I'm keen to ask you a handful of questions on that. We think this idea of sort of self-leadership, that it's very hard to lead someone else unless you know what fills you up. What do you do on that front? What do you do to make sure you're feeling well to be able to do the job you do?
Well, you as you know, and I suspect as some people have heard me say before, but you've been a big influence on me in this regard in terms of meditation, and spoke about our dear friend, mutual friend Jeffrey before, and he's a big believer as well. And so I've looked at successful people, and I see, the success and the balance that you've had in your life, which I think is and should be a role model for many people, because you've got the balance right, I think, and it's there are always pressures and always issues you've got to deal with, but in your work life, most importantly in your home life, and obviously your business life, and your sporting career as well. And so meditation's been important for me. Exercise is important, and I think the ability to have those relationships where you can talk freely, and it's not a download because you don't want to burden somebody else with all of your problems, but it is having those trusted people around you that you can bounce ideas off, and they don't have to be connected with your workplace, and they can be different people in your life for different elements that you can compartmentalise. So yeah, meditation's been important for me, and it allows a reset, and it allows that refreshing of the mind, and I think that's been important. And each to their own. People can find their solace or their good place, according to what's important to them.
It doesn't fit the public profile, Pete. You're a meditator. It's not something that people are going to understand. But it's something I you're a great listener when you're around. You genuinely feel like when you're talking to you're not focused on anyone else, and I've watched you take on things that other people would be surprised in a range of different areas. Is there one piece of leadership advice that you pass on to others?
I've always found it important to surround yourself with good people, and I have a very low turnover of staff, and I think it's important to identify those people that you can help create a culture with, and that you can bounce off, and that you can trust each other, and that the workplace doesn't become sort of a hard labour story. You can't be turning up and in an environment each day that's just not conducive to positive outcomes. So I think bringing those people together. And, if there's any leadership skill that I've got, it's identifying good people and generally people who are smarter than you as well, which is always a good lesson in life, and making sure that those people can blend together, and I think that way you get the most out of them, and I think you self-develop yourself as well, and I think that's an important part, and it's sort of a statement of the obvious for many, but for me that's been very effective.
You've got a really, really clear vision for what Australia should be. I can hear it in your words, the ability to own your own house, to live a healthy life, whether you're in Gove or in Mossman in Sydney or Toorak in Melbourne, this idea of living a safe environment, treating people with dignity and respect. But you come together in this environment of MPs and a pretty brutal world of politics. How do you try and get a team like that to share that vision and be on the same page?
Well, politics is better than it used to be. There used to be, sort of the gladiator age where you could lob limbs off and and attack each other, and so it's always been an adversarial environment. That's the nature of it. It's like a courtroom, and people are right to be passionate about arguing their beliefs. And I've spoken publicly. The Prime Minister's spoken publicly about the relationship that he and I have, and we got on well. We are able to talk about issues that are important for our country, and come together at moments where it's necessary to resolve matters, particularly of national security, quickly, and to deal with those threats or those issues. I think that's important. But there is an adversarial element to it. Sometimes it gets personal, which it shouldn't, and sometimes the people around you, can feel the impact of that as well, and you need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before, that you like Anthony Albanese, you think he's a decent person, you don't think he's a particularly good prime minister, but I think that is another trait of yours. I don't hear you talk down about anyone, that you treat people with dignity and respect, and even in that adversarial environment, you strike me as someone who's inherently curious. The fact that meditation's a random thing a decade ago when we spoke about it, but is there a path of curiosity that you've gone down recently that people might be surprised about?
Well, I'm discovering this world of podcasts, which has been a bit foreign, and it's hard to sort of find that block of time. So, but I do try and go for a walk or go for a run or go to the gym each morning, and it can be part of that. Although I like listening to music as well, and that helps clear the mind or just distract from what's ahead for the day. But it also allows some clear thinking. And one of the things that I haven't been successful at doing is trying to block out that period of time during the day that does give you the ability to think and to read more broadly. When I was Defence Minister, and I remember when I first came into this job, I thought, as Defence Minister, you're just absorbed with the briefs every day, and stuff is coming up, and getting calls and being dragged into important meetings and the rest of it. And it's hard to find that sort of thinking time and that bigger picture time. And I thought when I came into this job I would have that, because you didn't have the burden of a portfolio or a department, etc. But it's not really turned out to be the case. And so I want to work better on that. It obviously becomes harder as Prime Minister to be able to do that. But I do think you need to stop just dealing with the minute-to-minute engagement of your job and allow some time in your diary, designated and specific and deliberate, to think a little bit further afield.
We love saying, Peter, that the cost of leadership is time, and you can't fake that time, but then you still seem to be able to balance family life and be able to collaborate, and you've got great friends and put all that together. How do you get all that done?
Well, I think you have to prioritise, and you have to be a good time manager, or in my case, if you're not a good time manager, have a great PA and people around you that can manage time well. So my diary sort of goes in 15-minute blocks, and it's a fail for us if I have to go to the airport lounge. People talk about the chairman's lounge or all this sort of stuff. I like to go straight from security to the gate. It's boarding, because we do 200 flights a year, and another half hour in the lounge on every one of those just detracts from the time that I could be spending at home or on another task. So it's a matter of managing that effectively, and it's also a matter of putting that date night or that appointment that you want to go to with your wife or with your kids or their sporting event. For me, it's been, my kids are, Rebecca's 22 and Harry's 20, Tommy's 19. So they've finished school now. But even, Tom's playing footy after school, even trying to get to as many of those games as possible is important. And even if you're not there during the week, this is, again, every family's different, but the kids are so busy with their lives that, they want you to be there. But if you're not during the week, I think that was balanced by the fact that I always tried to get there for, swim club on a Friday night and, do the timekeeping and be there for that, or go to the footy match on a Saturday, or, training on Friday afternoon, whatever it is. And if you can get to those, and I found it incredibly rewarding, selfishly for myself, because to watch them develop and to go from puppy pack into, into a skilled sort of player, I was so proud of that. And it was also the most normal part of my week. But they were watching me on the sideline, and I think they had a pride that I was there taking an interest in them, and it helped, build a really strong relationship as well. And sometimes you can make excuses for not being there, and even as a minister, travelling to Europe or to the US, I loathed being away on weekends and would fly through the night to get back for weekend games, and so you have to get that balance right. And I've said it would kill me as a member of the ADF, the Defence Force, to be away for a 6-month posting, and how they do it I don't know, but to their great credit they do. And that's what's worked for us.
I always said you can't fake your time. You're either there or you weren't, and
Yes.
and clearly you made sure you were. We always see great leaders are really understanding of how they communicate, and you're an excellent communicator in your own unique way. Do you give it some thought? Have you got a strategy around how you get your message across?
Don't complicate it. And sometimes I give this example where I have a great deal of respect for Julia Gillard. I don't think she was a great Prime Minister by any stretch, but I remember in the debate around gay marriage at the time, and I think some leaders torture themselves in the language because they want to say what they really believe, but they filter it, or they don't say it in its sort of raw form. And I remember hearing her say that, I think the better way that she could have put her position was to say, look, I believe in gay marriage, but I don't think the country's ready for it, and I respect that. Hopefully one day it will be. And as opposed to saying that you don't believe in gay marriage because that's, what was probably the public mood at the time. It was a complicated debate, but it was just a sort of a snapshot, and maybe it's sort of an awkward demonstration of it. But I think the best leaders we've had in our country, a Bob Hawke or a Keating or a Howard, they're not tortured in their language, and they know what they believe in, and they're willing to fight for it. And sometimes you can get yourself in trouble because it's not filtered, or there's a full stop instead of a comma, so the qualification in the sentence is not included in the grab on the news. But sometimes, I listen to the PM at the moment, and I think he's trying to please everyone on the issue. And I just think, mate, you've got to stand up for what you believe in, and you're not going to please everyone. And if you try to please everyone, then generally it means you haven't arrived at the right outcome. So I think decomplicate it and don't forget where you've come from, and keep your feet on the ground, I think are always good lessons.
Peter, who's been the greatest leader in your life?
For me, John Howard, and I watched John from afar growing up, and I worked very closely with him. I was very grateful that he put me into the ministry at a pretty young age after only one term in Parliament. And he's still a mentor and a friend and a confidant for me now. And he's not somebody who's overbearing or on the phone every day at all. But I'll ring him time to time and say, how do you think we're going, or what do you think about this issue? And he's always obliging and very giving of his time and very generous.
You didn't hesitate on that. That was a question without notice for you. It clearly had an impact on you, and you value having that mentor still in your life.
Yes, I think again, I think John came from the suburbs. He understood the value of hard work, of respect, and he wasn't afraid to argue his beliefs and his structures, and that's been a quality that I've admired for a long time. And he hasn't got every call right by his own admission. No human being can. So he comes with that caveat, but I think he did a lot of good for our country, and he set us up for a period of wealth along with Peter Costello. They did a great job in managing the economy, and if you manage the economy well, then people can succeed in their own business lives and in their own personal lives.
But we're a bit obsessed with this idea of collaboration in the leadership groups that we're curating around the globe, and putting someone from your background with someone from a creative field, or a sports leader with a leader of the business world. As you enter this chapter for you, is there someone that you think about in any of your passions in life? I mean, clearly being Prime Minister of Australia is forefront of mind. Is there someone you thought, God, that'd be a great person to collaborate with in the future?
I look to a lot of people with sporting success, because I think there's a synergy between politics and sport. And you've got a lot more natural talent that you can rely on. Our game, not so much. But I do look at successful sports people, and I see the discipline, the sacrifice that they've made, and in some cases too, the sort of dragging into the public spotlight, where really they just want to play sport and play it well and chase their lifetime passion, and don't necessarily enjoy the spotlight. And I'm sort of similar in that way. I don't crave the public spotlight. I never have, but it's a necessary part of the job that I really enjoy, and that is making decisions or putting in place decisions that I believe in our country's best interests, and help people and provide that support to them. So that would, for me, be a bit of a yin and yang. And I think what you've done in your collaboration and the leadership group and the personalities, having listened to a lot of the podcasts that you've done and the people that you've brought together, I think it is. I think it's quite a remarkable model, and it may not be without precedent, but it's been a novel approach, and I really think it's a lot of good comes of that.
Very kind of you to say. That was the final question. I've got a follow-up one on the back of it. We're seeing in the US President Trump, which is a whole other topic, but happy to bring in Elon Musk into a government efficiency program and curate people from outside industries. Is that a model that, not that in particular, but do outside people have a role in government in Australia? Or
I think some business people being involved in the upper levels of the public service would be a great thing. I think as Defence Minister, I was incredibly well served from the public service, and the senior public servants are professional. They sometimes don't make decisions as quickly as you would want to, but if you're a leader in that portfolio or those portfolios, you can give direction, and people do react and they respond according to your direction and the decisions that you're making. But in some public service families in Canberra, they're a second, third, fourth, fifth generation, and I think we need a greater breadth of understanding of the real world and different experiences, and bringing that in is important. Many years ago, I was the assistant treasurer and had responsibility for the tax office, and I was very aware of the insular, sort of almost Stockholm syndrome nature of the place, because they're constantly under attack. Nobody likes the tax office, but I tried to develop a program there where people could go out and work in in some of the companies, and bring some of those people back in to get a better understanding of what was happening on both sides of the fence. And I think that's an important aspect as well.
But it's always a great pleasure to spend some time with you. Every time I've been around you, you only treat people with great dignity and respect. And my hope is that people listen to these conversations, they actually get to see the real Peter Dutton, and then they can make up their own mind. But thanks again. It's been great to catch up.
Mate, I really appreciate it. Nice to see you. Thank you.